so that we can share with folks after. And then if you are not currently speaking, please make sure that your mic is muted so that we can hear the speakers. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jose, who is going to lead us in our discussions. Jose, should I ask you your first question, or you got it?
Hi, thank you, Brenda. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's make it an informal discussion. So we were discussing the best way to engage with each other and to learn from each other, and these kind of informal chats. They seemed a good idea in the sense that they mimic something that is very useful that we do in HL7 meetings, or sometimes in working groups that we have, or sometimes in our own companies, which is, hey, I have a question about this. How would you solve it? How would this be solved? And sometimes one person has the answers that we need. Sometimes the discussion itself is already a good thing to have. And so we try to mimic that kind of stimulus that we have by being together. We try to mimic it here. So really imagine this as a table with a couple of seating places. No head table, just everybody sitting wherever they want. Some people sitting on the floor if they want, and the door is open. You can come in and out at any time, and we'll just be discussing topics that you find relevant. Some things I may be able to help, some things, but that's just because I'm starting the discussion. I hope I don't do all the talking. Some things I will ask if someone else has an answer, or if someone else has a similar experience, and then I also hope to learn from your experiences, from your expectations, and from your needs. And if we find ourselves stuck, then we also see what do I do when I get stuck, or what we should do when we get stuck, and that's the kind of thing. So let's take a couple of topics that you have mentioned in the questions. So in the Google Doc that was sent around. Let's start with that, and if the hopefully the discussion will take us to some interesting places, to some interesting, not only the topics that we talk about, this kind of resource, that kind of resource, not only that, but about the techniques to unblock ourselves when we go through these discussions, through these standardizations. It's not really about having one answer and having this, like, this is the truth, this is the one answer. It's more about exercising our own methods of standardization, of making those decisions, looking at the pros and cons. Let me start with the teaser, and then we go to the questions. A few weeks ago, one colleague said, asked me a question: how would you do a medication catalog? And I know that is a very dear area to me. That's something that I really care a lot about. So I said, well, if you want to do it formal, you will start in that way. And then I gave one set of resources. However, after the discussion, we realized that maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you need that. Or if you do this, you can do that with a couple of extensions. Or you know what, at the end of the discussion, you know what, just use a medication resource. It's not intended for that, but for what you want, it's really the best solution. So there's no right or wrong answers in absolute. There's just answers that we can have that will change with the context. And if we just have a more static perspective to how FHIR is implemented, so a more prescriptive perspective, we will always be taking those decisions as granted forever. And I try really hard to exercise my muscles of thinking, why is this like this? Could it be different? Some colleagues will tell you that I use those muscles too much, too often, but that's okay. But at least if we have a solution, I think it will always come from discussion. So this is the kind of stimulus that I would propose for today, that I'm trying to stimulate here. And I would like to start by pointing then at the Google Doc. Should I share my screen? Maybe it's better. I don't have anything else to share, but I can share my screen. Just that if I need to jump to the FHIR specification, then it's easier to just point at one place. So let me see. I can share my screen. So we sent around a document with space for questions, so for you to ask some questions. If you haven't, and if you have something, or if you want to have something added, or if you realize something that, or by discussion you realize that you actually had that question but you did not remember, or what we discussed gives you other questions, just let us know. So I would start with the order that they are in here. Not necessarily because they are the most the clearest order, but I will skip. So I'll start with the first one, but then I'll skip 3, 4, and 5. They seem very similar, or similar to the same things. Jump to question 6 because that will be easy to answer and will take us somewhere. And then I think the questions 3, 4, and 5, they might give us a bit more bulky answers. So we would have the things that are solved quickly or that are parked quickly. We don't know. They can be addressed first, because that's also one of the things that I want to share, is that sometimes we don't have an answer. Sometimes we have to ask other people. Sometimes we have to make our own decisions and stick to this. So if that's okay. Now I don't have any feedback if you're hearing you well or not, so I will just assume that you are. Yeah, the question number 2. We are planning to use Azure API for FHIR. This is a new service. We wanted to know if someone has had some experience with it. That's a fine question. I haven't. Now, this is one of the things I haven't. So does anyone in this group have already some experience in using the Azure API for FHIR? Sorry for the question. First question, just maybe using as an icebreaker. Does anyone participating now have any experience with the Azure API that they made for FHIR? Someone is chatting. Okay, Adam says no. Oh, by the way, you can open your mic, so there's no reserved slots. So if you want to type, that's fine. If you want to say, then that's also fine.
Please feel free to jump in. And Roki, I know this was one of your questions, so if you have anything to clarify, please feel free to do that.
Sure, thank you very much. I try.
So, but you asked the question like whether the API applies referential integrity. What do you mean with that?
All right, so I'm because obviously I'm part of a NGO, really. So it's many of us really asking questions. I'm just here for representation. So I'm not really quite, because I also asked this person what they meant. So I'm not sure. I'm personally not sure what they meant. They haven't gotten back to me just yet. So it's an open guess.
That's fine. Oh, we have a lot of those. We have questions like, well, you know what? Thinking of it better, I don't know really what they were after. That happens more often than not. So if by referential integrity, if we say that, for example, if we upload, I'm just starting this discussion on this topic with some example I had in Belgium. We had a server, and we say that every time that that we create some allergy or some observation for a patient, if the patient does not exist, we create it at least as a placeholder in the vault. So that's fine. That's an option. That's a bit overly complicated option, but it is an option. But the thing is that if you do it when you have the second allergy or the second observation coming in for that patient, you should not create the patient twice because you already have it. So if this is the kind of things, it depends. FHIR itself has all the mechanisms that you need to ensure the integrity there, but it does not enforce it, except for the fact that if you search for one patient, well, the server unique ID, that is guaranteed unique, but the passport number, if you want to use it, or the medical record number, if you want to use that as an identifier, that is not guaranteed unique. You can have two patients with the same passport number or with the same social security number. You can have those, and those are not built in. You can build something around FHIR that does it, and normally the Azure API and all the APIs, so the implementations that we have out there, they should, since they follow the FHIR specifications. I don't know. So for me, I don't know how the Google API does it. I do not know what is the integrity that they are looking for. So I do not know how Google does it. But yeah, so this would be more a question for me of, let's ask an example of what they mean, that show us what should happen and show us what should not happen. So if you say apply referential integrity, okay, what does it mean in concrete? Can you give us one example? And then it makes our lives easier in the general second method of answering questions. So if we don't have the answer, we ask someone next to us. If that someone next to us is not there or does not know, we go and ask out there. And the first stop is really the FHIR chat. So first a question: does everyone here in this discussion have a Zulip chat.fhir.org account? I don't mind putting people on the spot by asking, does anyone here not have a chat.fhir.org account? Okay, I will take that as extreme shyness, or everyone does have an account. Oh, perfect, Adam. That's exactly what I wanted to get. Yeah, please do. Okay, Ilona, I really recommend you to create one. Because one of the things that we will do today, just to get you more familiar with it, is just go a bit through this. Maybe I ask one of the questions on behalf of this group, or maybe someone else asks. It's really my go-to place. It's the thing that I check most likely first in the morning and latest at night is the chat.fhir.org. Sometimes I check it too late at night, and then there's some interesting discussions, and then the night becomes a bit shorter because there's interesting discussions over there. But yeah, whenever you don't have an answer, it can be a very beginner's question, it can be a very advanced question, or it can be discussions about, hey guys, I think this is wrong, or so we are now discussing translations, and we are just saying how should we do translations? We know that the way that we do it is not perfect. Should we do this in a consistent way? So we are going to enhance the standard, maybe the tools, definitely, and all those questions, they start in the same place. So I really recommend to get an account here. We'll get back to this in a second. Now let me go back to the list of questions. Roki, sorry, is this satisfactory to you by saying, I don't know, but if you ask an example, then we can check what's happening, and then if we don't know what's happening, we can check in the Zulip chat. Is that a good enough answer for you?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That sounds great, actually. So I'm just gonna go back to my people and ask clarification and perhaps get back to you guys. But that sounds great as of now. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So indeed. So and as the group grows in synergy, and the amount of and the number of people and the experience that we have, so whether this group or the groups that you have locally, or whatever communities of practice that we want to create, that's a bit of how FHIR is growing organically. Is that people get around, they start sharing some knowledge, and next time they gather, they have more knowledge to share, they have more experience. This is what we want to do also here. Number 3, it would be nice if the device would send the data directly in a FHIR format. Roki, is this also your question?
Yeah, I believe it is. But my name is not there. But yeah, that's me. That's
okay.
Me.
Do you? Sorry. So I read the question, and okay, there's a device that sends observations. But maybe for understanding better the context, can you share? Is it possible? Are you allowed to share what device are we talking about, or what type of device are we talking about?
Sure. Yeah, it's
because the device can be an app, can be a.
Yeah, no, it's a medical device, actually. So basically, the NGO I work for, it's building medical devices, ventilators, really. So yeah, so now just working on the software, and there's the kind of approach they want to take. So that's why all the many questions. But yeah, it's a ventilator. It's a medical device. Yeah.
Okay. So so the questions that you have, we have so it would be nice if the device would send the data directly in a FHIR format. Well, that you can if the device is conformant, right? So you have to configure the device to do this, or you have to find some sort of a gateway in the middle. That's also not uncommon. It's actually quite common that you have devices with their own language. Sometimes they use other standards like IEEE standards, and you have a gateway in between that does some sort of conversion translation between the different formats. So if you want the device to talk in a FHIR format, that is the first step. Then the observation, the question about some data needs to be archived in the long term, and some data are just temporary. My personal guess would be that this would be, first of all, a design option. So it's not a standardization option. It's really a system design approach. So your answer will depend on who is answering. I would like to see other feedback other than mine, because my idea is that just put it all on the FHIR server and then temporarily go to the FHIR server and see what to purge. That would be the simplest, because what I care about is having the server receive data in a consistent format. And for that, you would make sure that you have one mechanism to get data, whether this is the permanent observations and the waveforms. Because if you do that, then you have one interface, not two interfaces. If you have one interface, you have half the work of maintaining that interface and changing that interface and reporting that interface and debugging that interface, and the number of devices. They also have less interfaces. So it's always good to seek for economy of interfaces. And for this reason, I would say, well, I would do that. And then inside the database, I would choose what to purge on a temporary basis, or to archive, maybe. Sorry, maybe I don't need to purge, I just need to archive some data, something like this. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? It's really a system design and implementation choice. It's not a standardization option. Does anyone have any choices? Rocky, do you have any thoughts, any further insight into this?
Yeah, no, I'd like a clarification on something. You said that this will depend on who's answering, right? So what exactly do you mean by that, by who's answering?
So if you ask me, I would say, yes, put all things that you can in a FHIR format, because what is temporary today might not be temporary tomorrow, because instead of two interfaces, you have one interface. So my answer is, yeah, keep everything, and by means, or by doing this, you are actually telling the server to accept all this data in a FHIR format. So I'd say yes. And I think also FHIR supports waveforms in observations already. So if you do that, yeah, my answer would be sure, send everything in a FHIR format. Unless you have another reason, or if you have any constraints. If you say, well, but putting the waveform in a FHIR format would not be good for us, it would be okay, but for the device it would be not okay, because then the device has to do some weird conversions. And I don't know, for example, they export that as a PNG. That's what they have, like the CTG diagrams for when women are pregnant. They have the waveform that's measured there. Maybe you just want to capture any events there. Maybe you just want to capture the minimum and the maximum and the variation there. And if there's any distress from the fetus, or from the fetus, regardless of the phase of the pregnancy, if it's just during pregnancy or before delivery, maybe that's what you want. And then you really have, and maybe you just want to have an image. Maybe that device is the only thing that device does is send you the image of the waveform. For example, an ultrasound might also only send you the image of the waveform. Maybe you don't need that in FHIR. Maybe you just need that stored somewhere else as a PNG or something like this. But since it's easy to put it in FHIR, why not? So I would say that by default, I would say put everything in a FHIR format if you can, if the device can do it. But if you say, well, for doing that, I will need to do a conversion and all these things, well, then your answer might vary. That's what I meant, which with it depends on the context, depends on who you're asking. But if you ask me, everything in a FHIR format, and it's not because it's good because it's FHIR, it just reduce the number of interfaces to the system. If you see each FHIR interface has a wire between two systems, if you have too many wires, then the whole thing will become hairy and become messy at some point. It becomes spaghetti. If you have just two, and if those two are big or are wide enough, then you have lasagna. Lasagna is always better than spaghetti. So it's always better to have, in my opinion, to have a minimum number of comprehensive or good interfaces than to try to make point-to-point connections depending on each use case. But this is my opinion. Rocky, please challenge back.
Yeah, no, cool. I was about to say this is actually a really good answer. So, and I really like what you just said. And no, thank you. No, thank you for that. That's food for thought. Thank you.
Okay. So ways to minimize the data overhead. What do you mean?
Well, it basically says like, we just want to minimize the data sent by a device, right? So yeah, what would be the best way, I guess, to do that?
When we talk about data overhead, it depends. So depends where you are. If you are in a hospital setting, I doubt that 10 megabytes more or less will make a big difference in one communication. But if you have that 10,000 times per second, then it does make a difference. If you're in a remote environment where the connectivity is not very, very easy to get, then a few kilobytes might make a difference between the message going through or not. So ways to minimize data overhead, there's a couple of things that you can do. For example, if you want to implement the correct encoding with using law encode SNOMED, that you can do regardless of database or sorry, of bandwidth constraints. If you send a line code, you send a line code. If you send a custom code instead of a line code, you're still sending the same information. So it's practically the same number of bytes that you're sending. So being compatible with standard terminologies, so the question about LONC and SNOMED, that really should not affect the bandwidth overall of what you are transmitting. So I don't understand the last point. Like, it seems that with specifying these types, the payload can bloat up quickly. I don't know where this would be, or where this would be true. Maybe I'm missing something, but normally you would. So if you want to send just text only, then you send text only. But text only has the problems of, first of all, not being easy for machines to interpret if it's correct or not and to validate. And text only is actually very likely going to take up more characters than the code. And then because the code, you can have the code representing a sentence this big. Sorry, I don't know where my camera is, but very big. And the code synthesizes that sentence. So if you send just the code, you're better off than just sending the entire sentence. Not that coding is used for compression. That's not the idea that I want to transmit, but I don't see how how specifying these types like LONC and SNOMED would increase the payload or would increase the overhead.
Yeah, so I guess that obviously this was we were thinking about different approaches depending on the context, and the context that we are considering at the moment is remote, where the connection is unstable perhaps. So that's why we're just wondering if if there's a best approach to do it, or best approach to again avoid that overhead and not affect quality really, and the amount of data that you get. Yeah.
Correct. So 3 things that I can share, that I can think of to minimize the data that goes back and forth. So these are just 3 things that I know that the standard contains that you might want to explore them. I don't know if they apply or not, but I'm just going to show it anyway. So first of all is when you go to the search. So you go to any version of FHIR and you type search, or you go in and you search for the search page, and the search page says everything you need to know about the search. There is one option. So suppose that you're asking, suppose that your server is asking the device, instead of the device pushing data to the server is asking to the device, please send me the result that you acquired last night. Something like this. If that would be the scenario, you can do that search, and you can add parameters to say, yeah, but please only show me the things from last night at 2 a.m. because that's the time when I last synchronized, so I don't need more than that. Or you can say, please show me only the summary of that, and then I will decide if I want to query more stuff. So the summary option is described here, that it shows the different parts of the resource that matter, and that those can be only. I'll get to that in a second. In the summary definition, or only the text narrative, or only the data without the text narrative, or only the search count. I think there's a word missing, or return everything. So if you say return all the content of all the resources, then you get much more data back than if you say just include the summary. And the summary can be just a count of the resources that you find, which I don't know if it helps, but maybe a first query will be get me everything, but just show me the count. And if the count is 0, you don't bother anymore. So you just save a few kilobytes in that transaction. Or you say, I just want the text because I just want to read if everything is okay. I don't think that will be very common. But you say, I don't want the text. So I don't know if you're familiar with the text, but I will show an example of the narrative in a resource. Or just show the data, so forget the narrative, or just show the summary, which is the data elements that are considered important, really important in a given resource. And I will look at the device resource to show that. Oops, device. Please speak up. I'm feeling uncomfortable for being the only one doing the talking. If you have if you look at the resource, for example, device here, or if you look you might want to look at the observation. If you look at the observation, you see there is a couple of flags here. So this is the observation definition, these are the flags. This flag here means is summary. So if you search for the summary, you'll get the identifier, you'll get the instantiates if that matters. You have based on, so these are protocol definitions of the observation. You will not get the category because it's not in the summary. You will not have, what else? You will not have the data absent reason, an interpretation, a note, etc. So you'll get a pre-tailored or pre-configured version of the resource based on what the HL7 committees have found that is typically more relevant. You can change that, you can alter that behavior, but in the way that you can say, only show me the summary, you can define what is the summary for you, and then you can save some bandwidth there. And so for example, if you have something like a waveform here, you could say, don't include the waveform in the summary. Therefore, when you get, and if you activate so if you do a search and if you only get the things that are not summary, then you just ignore that. So the search will ignore that waveform for you. So that could work if the waveform is the one that carries a lot of data. And if you don't need that, if you just need the maximum and minimum value or whatever values to get that in one query, then you just launch that query, and the server can absorb that. At the same time, the server can also say, okay, I'm going to do the same query, but now I will drop the summary tab, which means I'll get everything. Fine, then it's still the same kind of interface, but with one parameter here that doesn't require you to manage two different interfaces. It just requires you to manage what is in the summary or what not. So this is another, using the summary is another option. If you're still talking about the search, let me see, because I need to put this.
But like ideally, you still be able to configure what you want to get.
You can. When we get to the profiling, so I'm saying this, and I still have to confirm. So I will ask this in the chat later today. But I will, or actually, I'll look at the spec. So I should do it properly. I'll look at the spec to see if there's any indication there that I shouldn't. But before I say, so if I see that I shouldn't, then I will say we shouldn't. But if there's nothing written there, I will just confirm with the rest of the FHIR community, and I will put it somewhere on the chat so that you can follow up. Maybe we could set up some communication channels. Let me ask one question now, off topic. I think we have the contact of the people that registered, right? Rhonda, do you confirm that?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so if the participants, if they don't mind, I think we will still figure out, and apologies, I didn't think of this before. We can figure out what is the best channel if we want to have a channel for just for this group. Could be the LIMC, could be the Digital Square group, could be, I don't know what group we want to create, or just to use one. And then we can say, hey guys, we have a couple of questions, and then we'll send one email saying we have a dedicated group for us where we are more comfortable or for example, when I see a notification in that group, I know which context this is coming from. Or we can just say, yeah, let's use the generic implementers channel for this. And but is it okay that we send you an email as a follow-up to this session today, just to clarify which channel we can use for that?
Sounds good to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So so I'll check if we can use if we can configure that is summary flag, because if we can, then we can use that to simplify or to reduce the payload in our search results. Another thing we can do still in the search is quite more advanced, or not very common, but it's also described here, is the elements. So you can say, get me observations, like, or get me the patient, but don't show me the whole thing. Just show me the identifier, the active, and the link, or just show me the value, the code, and the category, for example. Or don't show me the category so don't show me the category, just show me the code and the value. Or show me the patient, but don't show me or don't show me the patient. So you can configure these things by listing the elements that you have. So it's a special search parameter that we can use. It's something that allows the server to get less data from the client allows the requester to get less data from the provider if the provider is being pulled. So it depends on who triggers the communication. And I presume this will be the case, if you have the device or the system is the one that pushes data to the server. So if the creator of the data is the initiator of the data, then what you might want to do is to just, first of all, really rely on what is mandatory or not. And so you just post an observation, but without the focus, without the encounter, without the effective date, because maybe you don't care about this, without the performer, the value, I think it makes sense. Data absent present, you may or may not include it. So you can play with optionalities there to send only what you want. Another thing you can do, and we'll see it in the session 2 weeks from now, is when we do profiling, we have ways to say, okay, then I'm going to create 2 observations. One is going to be my full waveform observation. The other one is going to be my simple result observation. And then you can say this one has a mandatory waveform. The other one does not have a mandatory waveform. They're still observations. They go through the same channel, but the content is different. And you can actually choose which ones to search for or choose which ones to send. It's 2 flavors of the same interface. It gets processed exactly in the same way, but it's just 2 different profiles. That's why we will have it in the profile session. We can decide which 2 flavors, or we can make special flavors of our resources. So this would be the ways that I can think of to minimize the data that you have to send over. Am I missing something? Is this answering the question?
Yeah, no, it is very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay. So let's look at the next ones, just trying to catch up a bit. Using device properties would be a good way to reduce the payload by storing as much as possible. Oh, yeah. So this could actually be an interesting thing. You don't have to redescribe the device every time that you send the data. Maybe you just say, this is device ID number 1, and then you send one notification, which is device ID number 1 is, oh, my battery is dying out. I hope I don't have to get my charger, but if I, please warn me if my voice is being cut. You don't have to send the full definition of the device. In fact, it would actually be good practice to say, I'll send the device just once as a separate transaction, or just included in the first time that I upload data. But from the rest, I'll just use device as an identifier, and I do not have to send the full device anymore. So if you go to the device, I think most of the fields will be optional. So yeah, everything is optional. I think, wait, everything is optional. Everything so far is optional. Yep, everything is optional. So actually the only thing you need to do is to say, I'm going to use this device. So the first observation that I send on a given site, or maybe that would be part of a device catalog, we can discuss that. Then you say the system, so the device must send its own characteristics. but just do it once or every time that it changes. And then it goes through the device interface, or you use device resource. Then all the other observations, they just point to that device. They just use an internal reference to the device, and you don't have to describe anything else than just one simple identifier. So if I go back to the observation, if you were in the session that we had last month about just the basics, catching up with the basics of FHIR, you would remember that we have the contained resources. So in this case, we could have an observation with a contained device, and everything about the device will be in there. But we can also have an observation with a contained device where the only thing that we have is just the identifier of the device. So if you send the device ABCD and the full description in the morning, then, or as long as that ABCD device still points to that same device with that same configuration, with those same parameters, all those things remain the same, then you can just say it's still device ABCD, and that's the one that I'm going to refer to. If you need to change it, and then you change it only when the device changes, not every time that you acquire some new measurement. For example,
sorry.
Go on.
No, I was just wanted to clarify. So this will be best practice, right? Like the best approach.
Definitely. Don't send information that you don't need to send. Send only the information that you need to send, and use references as much as possible, because you actually want to keep integrity of your data by saying, I don't want to repeat my data definition because it's already there. So if I have an update, I will send that update, but I don't want to send the data every time, because I don't know, maybe someone has reconfigured the device and the data that was pending from yesterday is only arriving today, but maybe last night someone changed the device, and but the data that I got is still from yesterday afternoon, so it's still referring to device that is as it was yesterday afternoon. The data is there, but I don't want to the data that I receive only this morning to override the device definition data that I received last night, because that's when the device was reconfigured. So it's always good to use the references as much as possible. And if you see in the observation you have the device there, it's a reference. And if you go to the reference, you see that you can put there as an identifier. So you say, put here the device identifier, and that's it. So yeah, maybe that's yet another way to reduce your payload.
Right, thank you. Sounds great. Thank you very much.
So applying a patch to a resource, changelog is used to keep track of all the patches to that resource. I don't know if by changelog, if you mean the server changelog, and in that sense, I cannot answer. I'll go to the chat in a second. If you talk about versioning, so all the FHIR resources have versioning. In the first case, so if you talk about changelog as the server, really, you know, the server, almost the metal, the HTTP syslogs, those things, I think it really depends, but they typically don't have a limit. If you talk about the FHIR versions, so FHIR resource version, so every resource can be versioned. If you use that, then there's also not a limit to my knowledge there. And because I was struggling with the word changelog, I was wondering, maybe I missed something. So this is just an excuse for me to go here and go to Zulip and say, let's see what we have as changelog. And then Zulip will tell us the truth. It will tell us who's talking about changelogs and what's happening. And then this is really what I do. I mean, if I don't know a word, or if I'm not familiar with a word, then we have just to use Zulip, which in my case is much slower because I'm using my video, my internet is slower, and I'm sharing. And my battery is in power saving mode. So I can try to hold. We still have a few more minutes. That should be okay. Yeah, so I see the change logs. They come up with the in the happy. So in the server specification. Bulk data, this is an implementation specific changelog. So someone is doing that, but it's not in the FHIR specification itself. Best practice for medical devices. Let's see what this guy says about changelog. Oh, same questions here. Okay. I don't know who was answering this, if someone is answering this. Let me see. Copy link to message. I think there's no easy way to just open the stream from here. maybe I think it might be the same group.
Oh yeah.
But
That's us.
see, well, some answers, but not a lot of answers here. So Michael has sent an email to Caitlin. So see, best thing is to ask Michael about these questions.
Sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
I feel my voice, so I feel I'm here cut off. If you still hear me, do you give me 1 minute to get my power?
Go for it, Jose.
Hello?
Go for it. Jose, go for it. Get your power.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. As we wait, I will just open this up to everyone. So one of the things we'd like to do as we move forward and finish off the foundational series for our FHIR webinars is look to you guys to help us understand what it is you want to learn about next. Does anyone have any thoughts on topics or questions that they'd like to cover more in depth? I'd love to hear about it. There's a place to type it up if you don't want to say it out loud, but we'd love to hear whatever you're interested in so we can plan sessions that are a little bit more focused and aimed at helping you address your needs.
I'm back, I hope.
You're back.
Can you hear me?
All right, guys, we can. You're back. All right, guys, I'm going to keep asking the same thing.
So
Ideas and topics. Back to you, Jose.
Yeah, please. Oh no, just put them in here in this Google Doc. I think this actually would be a good way for us to mention in the at the end of the session where we will discuss this in the. So for example, here we can say. For example, a retention period be specified after which change logs from patch commands are disregarded. If you're talking about the server change logs, I think you can do something like that. If you're talking about the FHIR versions, I don't know if you can delete old versions. I don't think so. So FHIR versioning is very simple. Every time you update a resource, the old resource still stays there, but it gets a new version, and it's when you get it, when you retrieve it, you only retrieve the latest version. So the whole life cycle of the resource is preserved on the server typically. So these are the typical implementations. You can deactivate that feature if you want, and typically the last version is when it's deleted. So when a resource is deleted, some servers, they still have the resource with the status deleted, so it doesn't show on searches, but that's what they have. So depends on which change logs are you talking about. If you're talking about a more functional, so the actual resource changes through the life cycle, that will be kept if your server has versioning. The rest, every REST server will have a changelog normally. So what's the size limit and all those things? That will be a question to ask in the EG about Happy. So if you want to ask about the Happy server, you go to the Happy server and to the Happy stream and ask the questions on the Happy stream. I'll just put a link there. Sorry, just for taking notes here, but then it's easier not to forget. And
I
we have it.
Thank you.
Oops. Sorry, not this one. This one. Okay. Same thing for retention period be specified after which change. Oh, sorry, that's the same question. Store the temporary data in a single observation and continuously apply patches to it instead of using the device property as a method to minimizing payload. I have no idea what this means. Can you explain?
Yeah, I don't. I have no clue myself either.
Okay. Again, the tactic, I get this a lot. The tactical, my tactic would be ask them, can you give an example? And then once they give, two things will happen. Either they can give an example and they they know what they are asking, or they don't get an example, and then you say, does it really matter that much if you don't have an example? Maybe they have to go even one step further upstream, and then until someone actually knows exactly what they asked, if they are still in the company, if they're still working on the project, etc. I just wanted to say that sometimes it's okay if we don't have a, so it depends on the requirements, of course, but if we don't know where requirement comes from, it's okay to ask, but sometimes some of them can be dropped by this question, by these questions. If you say, can we minimize the payload? Well, the way that we are doing it now, it doesn't really apply anymore, because we now have an interface that shares the waveforms in one side and the results in the other side and the device in the other side. So does this question still make sense? And if you don't have anyone to discuss it with, sometimes it's hard because you have the requirement lying there and you have to show somehow that you are compliant with that. But if you have the chance, feel free to say, hey guys, can we challenge this requirement just a bit? Or can I ask what this requirement is about? I think for me, it's always a good practice to say, do we really need this? Not in a sense that we are questioning if that's true or not, but if we are saying, can you please explain? Because as we are designing the interfaces, we should also keep in mind that it's not just translating file formats. It's about standards and about what are we trying to do. We are trying to make things less complicated for the implementer. So if you make things more complicated just for the sake of doing FHIR, then that's something is missing in the picture. Then someone said, then you ask also, Rocky, how should an encounter be defined for such a treatment? Not knowing the context, I think the encounter is more of a grouping thing. So the encounter is supposed to be an administrative representation of a patient's encounter with the hospital, of a patient's visit, or a patient's not treatment in the sense of clinical, but treatment in the sense of administrative. So let me give, and again, I do not know if this is the example, but it's the one that I studied many years ago, so maybe it can be used here. If you talk about CTG, cardiotocography, so for pregnant women, they go in and they spend a couple of hours, sometimes with something on their bellies, and then just creates a waveform. In this case, you have the device configuration, whatever parameters they have to use. You have the, well, actually, which device you're using, if the battery is okay, and all those things, so that you use that. You have the encounter itself, so the visit of the patient. It was at this time for this thing. This was the purpose because the patient was feeling pain or the patient was bleeding or whatever. So you can do those things under those devices, and then you have, of course, under those resources. Sorry, and then you can have the device and the observation resources as well. So I don't exactly have a formula to be whether it would be a good idea to store the temporary data in a single observation. So if you're talking about always updating one observation with, let's say, the latest version of that waveform, that could work, but I don't see the alternative. Instead of using the device property, I don't know how that would look like, or what you mean. So suppose that you want to minimize not the total payload, because that exam might take several megabytes of data, but suppose you don't want to save all those megabytes. What you want to do is to send those in smaller chunks, so that if you lose network, you don't have to start from scratch with the same probability of it going wrong. If you want to do that, yeah, in that case, you have a couple of options. I'm just saying this for the sake of exercise. In that case, what you can do is to say, I'm going to create different observations, or I'm going to create, yeah, actually, I think you would need to create different observations, because if you apply patches to it, you still, when you create one resource or one observation and then create another one, I actually don't remember what the standard behavior is, but I would expect that if you send a new version so if you send a post, if you send the second half of the waveform, that post will delete the first half of the platform. If you send this with a patch, with a RESTful patch, I think that this will just change the things that have to be changed. But I don't know how you can do that without sending the whole wavelength again. So I don't know if that. So I'm sorry, I went into my inner geek to see. I don't know how this could be, how patching could be used to save data or to slice the data. You might as well split one observation into several observation components, because in the observation we have components, and then you send one observation, which is this is the result of the procedure. You keep it open for now, and then you send the component one, and then you send the component two. So actually, you can do that, or you can send different observations one by one, and then at the end, at the end of that, you can have another observation and say, I'm going to have a big observation, and that observation has members, other observations. So you can send all the slices first, and then a big one saying, this big one is the sum of all of those. Or you can do the same thing by saying, I'm going to send you something big. Here's the beginning. And then you send just the umbrella, and then you send all the slices. And then when those slices are done, you say, oh, now I'm closing the big one, the envelope or the umbrella, because you now have all the slices. You can do that by sending one observation after the other, and then just having references to observation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can do that. So better to separate the resources, keeping in mind that if you do a patch, you can maybe save some bandwidth. If you do a post, you don't really save any bandwidth. And of course, the same approach as before. Now, because you mentioned in the question encounter as well, if you have anything that can go, sorry, you mentioned device property. If you can put something else on the device resource or in the encounter and just send it once instead of stuffing the interface with repeated information, please do it. That's the way to do it. So I don't think that would conflict. Interface request to read the whole change log during initial loading. Yeah, so this could be a good use for example, you get the device information, encounter information, you get all the properties of device, you get everything, you get the duration of the procedure. Really see like this on Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp or all those things that you just go up and down, and when you go up and down, you're just saying, please get me the results that fit in this window or that fit in this part that I'm looking at. So that's perfectly acceptable way of just getting the information that you need. So Roque, if you want, we can, this is one of the things that, let me just put here the idea. We can continue that. So I'm just going to say, let's do it. Let's continue the discussion on Zulip, because there might be a few things that we might to have further dialogue, or other people listening in. And sometimes if we have a question like, hey, I don't know who knows this, for example, terminologies. Oh, let's ask Rob, he knows about terminologies. It's always good to have this. So first interaction here, I think this looks okay. This would be a good approach. For more details, we don't expect the Zulip chat to solve the issues for us or to do the work for us, but it's always a good place to say, I don't know is this a good idea or a bad idea? How can we slice this? Especially if we ask the questions like, how are others doing it? I want to slice my observations, but I don't want to slice it in a way that other people are not doing it, because the more people work in a consistent way, the less effort we all have. So, and this, for that reason, I would say this seems an interesting discussion for us to continue on Zulip.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So yeah, be happy to do that.
Okay. So the encounter, I think I kind of answered the other question. The encounter, you change it whenever you update it, whenever it changes. So in this case, the encounter is something specific for a patient. So whenever there's a new patient, you change it. Whenever the reason for the patient to visit is different, you change it. Whenever the unique administrative identification of the encounter, for example, if the clinic closes and then next day they have to readmit the patient, then you change the encounter if you need to functionally. So whenever something functional changes, that is that would be the trigger for redefining the encounter, because it's actually a different encounter. You don't have to create one frequently. The only thing that you might want to create one frequently is to make sure that during those frequent changes, you don't miss any important changes for the encounter. But I would say the question should be turned upside down, which is, don't try to pull the changes of the encounter to see when you spot the differences. No, try to put the trigger there. If you say there is a trigger here, and that trigger has to create me a new encounter resource, try to put it on a push approach instead of a pull approach, if that is possible. So if the administrative system says, okay, we need to, this might change, then you will say, yeah, but just notify us when it does change. That's something that you should do more preferably than try to poll it for changes.
All right, that would be the best way to do. Okay, cool. That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so only some device properties can be mapped. Should that be done, or should a custom system be used? We don't. No, you have. We can also bring this to chat, but if only device properties can be mapped, that's not really a good the good question. The good question is, are those some device properties sufficient or not? If they are sufficient, yeah, no, then you just send what is sufficient. You don't want to send more information that is necessary. But if you have should a custom system be used which encompasses all the properties of device, just think of this as all the relevant properties of device. Don't send things that you don't want to send, but pay attention, please. Or my recommendation is always to pay attention that what you don't need today, maybe you need tomorrow, and vice versa. So it's if we say we are going to design this interface by excluding this property, well, sometimes it goes wrong. So you have to also be ready to react quickly to any changes there. So if only on some device properties can be mapped, start with those that are mandatory. If some of those properties, they don't really map to a FHIR attribute, put it on Zolib, because that will be a good trigger for us to say, oh, that's right, we didn't think of this. Oh, we need a lot number of device. Actually, we have it, but suppose that would be the case. Yeah, we don't have a sublot number. We don't have a sublot number. How would we do this? And if you don't have an answer, we would say use an extension, and then you can map it immediately to FHIR. If we can even say, oh, this sounds like a good addition for the next version of FHIR, we will do it. Or if you say, no, you know what? No, sublot number and lot number is really the same thing, because some of us might have experience on those fields, and we can say, no, just call it lot number. And I think if I look at the device, I hope that lot number, I hope I'm not wrong, but I think it should have a 0 to many lot numbers. Let's see. Lot. Oh, it's 0 to 1 in the string. So yeah, okay. So if you say I need several lot numbers of the same device, then you'll have an interesting challenge for the HL7 working groups. They will most likely tell you, and I will normally be involved on those because it's devices. We will normally tell you that, well, for now you can only have 0 to 1. I think this is the previous version was also like this. But if you need to send 2 lot numbers, then we should make a change. And actually, I'll try to remember to do that change, because I think this is the expected next version of FHIR. This is the continuous build. Actually, I think this should be 0 to many. But sorry, I'm just going into my own backlog now. Yeah, we don't have any more questions, but we do have upcoming upcoming webinars. So next we will have, I will launch a challenge like this also in the sake of time. Next we'll have a session on profiling, and after that I think, I don't know if there's one on, there's one on terminologies, and then there's one on making implementation guides. So it's really going to be the basics, but after those basics, and if we work together, and if you work, and if you get your hands dirty, you should be able to start making your own implementation guides for your own specifications, where, for example, you will define the CTG device, the cardiotocography device, or the CTG full observation and the CTG summary observation, where you can do those things and publish them in the same way that we do this specifications here, for example. This is an implementation guide for those of you who might not have seen it. The whole documentation here, the profiles and all those things, you should be able to produce one of these after those sessions that we have. But until then, so those are the next sessions that we have. Until then, or as we think of this, things. It would be good if you continue to feed us with ideas for next discussions. And I would like to listen now for any feedback about this session and anything that was left open and anything that we should cover for the next sessions, if there's any gaps or any interesting ideas. And after that, I would invite you to continue filling in this thing. Maybe we can have it. I'm just asking Rhonda now. Rhonda, should we have this as a rolling summary of what we are doing, and then we keep the track of all these questions as we go through them?
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll combine all the documents.
So does anyone have any quick questions for any things that we might have missed today that we would have been different? Sorry for asking feedback and trying to do it quickly at the end. Feedback from today?
I mean, I just want to thank you all really, because this has been really insightful. I've been, looking for answers for months. So here you come and, you answer in an hour. So I really appreciate it. And I really like the format as well. Like you doing your brainstorming and just taking us along. So that's been really useful as well. So no, thank you for that. Thank you.
Can I ask someone else if they don't mind speaking up? Because Rocky, you're also on the spot. Can I ask someone else to speak up and see how they felt this? Because someone that did not have any questions, how they felt this session? Anyone that's not on mute?
I think most people left at the hour, so I think
Okay.
Jemmy,
Okay.
if you've got a comment, that'd be great. Otherwise,
okay. Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm from SID Indonesia. So I'm a data engineer. I'm not really understand how to implement this on our system, but yeah, I'm trying to understand and listening more and waiting for my tech team to come in. But since they are not coming in, this will be great if the tech team can be join us and listen to the explanation. But thank you just for the explanation. Yeah.
And feel free to watch the video of the previous session if you are not there, or share with them and join the next sessions. We will grow in knowledge together as we go through this.
Yeah,
thanks for the feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are wrapping up then?
We are. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll put this recording up on the website along with the FHIR webinar. And Jemmy, I'm just sending you the link to our sorry, started speaking. But thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.